Hello everyone and welcome to a fresh new episode. The plan for today's episode was to make a tutorial about how to buy a second-hand or a used car, but we ended up doing the total opposite of that. We made some classic mistakes. We impulsively bought a car that we weren't really looking at. We inspected it in the dark and we bought it for the price that the owner was asking for. So yeah, some classic mistakes. But anyhow, the entire story is coming up on this episode. All my friends, rider. Today we are buying a car for one of my mates, Thibaut. He is sick of dailying his 1.2 liter Polo and he is ready for something else. So to search for a new car, we listed up some criteria for his new car to fulfill. First of all, and it speaks for itself, it needs to be a reliable daily driver. Next, it needs to be 25 years or older. This is because in Belgium, cars of that age get beneficial insurance rates and the registration is also cheap. So that is why it needs to be 25 years or older. It also needs to be spacious enough that it can seat 4 people comfortably. It also needs to have low fuel consumption and it has to be relatively easy to work on and cheap to maintain. For all of this we have a budget of 1500 euros, which includes buying a car and doing some fixes if that is necessary. And trust me, it was necessary. So now let's get into what happened. Before we started looking around for cars online, we obviously first had to determine what type of car we want to buy potentially. We know a lot about early water-cooled Volkswagens, so we started to look for something like a Mark II Jetta or a Mark III Passat. After scanning a lot of second-hand websites, we found one car advertisement that stood out to us. And after several weeks of texting with the seller, we arranged a meetup to look at a car. So I met up with Jasper and Thibaut and the three of us are going to take my Audi to the seller's place. The car we were going to take a look at was a Mark II Jetta with a 1.8 liter engine like my Golf. The owner advertised it as being very healthy with only one previous owner, no rust issues, and he told us that it ran fine. I didn't film the inspection of this car because I'm really self-conscious about filming in public, but to summarize, the seller was really shady and not the first owner of this car. The pictures he took did not represent the real state of the car, because the bodywork was in way worse condition than he advertised and it simply hasn't run for years, so it needed a lot of work to get roadworthy again. So our efforts were for nothing and we had to drive home in a bad mood and with a pile of money burning a hole in our pocket. So when we got home we started looking on our phones again and then we stumbled on a car that we weren't really considering to buy, but it actually could be a perfect fit. This 1991 Audi 100 was posted online that very day. It has a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that is almost exactly the same as the one in the Jetta, but instead of a carburetor it is fuel injected. Taking into account that this thing is way more comfortable than a Mark II Jetta, made Thibaut decide to contact the owner and he was actually down to meet us that very day. So I jumped straight back into my Audi to pick up the guys and go check out that thing.
Deze is niet meer gezond.
The drive was about 2 hours and we had to rush because the sun was setting and inspecting a car in the dark is far from ideal.
Is hier niet links? Zo, het lijkt op die foto. Zie je er al redelijk uit, of niet?
Nou, daar. Of course, it was as dark as can be when we got there, so we started looking over the Audi with our flashlights. Apart from a small lifter tick in the engine, it ran perfectly. But it was apparent that there was something up with the exhaust. The previous owner told us that one of the mufflers was leaking and that he welded in a piece of straight pipe to replace it. Other than that, we couldn't really spot any other flaws, apart from some wear and tear on the interior. So Thibaut and the owner took it for a test drive and drove it to a gas station so that we could take a look at it under some lights. The paint needs a thorough polish and there are 2 rust bubbles on the front fenders, but all in all it looks pretty neat for a car that is 29 years old and has done 240,000 kilometers. Thibaut wasn't really planning on buying anything like this, but owning a boat like this to daily drive will be way more comfortable than the other cars he was looking at. So we went back to the owner's place, signed some paperwork, and now Thibaut owns this freaking thing. Before we headed home, we had to stop at a gas station to fill up the Audi, because nobody sells a used car with a full tank of gas. It is so surreal that we got this thing. 4 hours ago Thibaut was convinced he was going to buy a Jetta, and now look at him. It was an impulsive buy, but all of us have a very good feeling about it. It is already midnight and we still have to drive 2 hours home, so it is time for the Audi's first test on the way back.
Oh jeez.
The Audi did great and everyone was surprised how comfortable it drove on the freeway. There was a slight vibration going through the car when it was driven at high speeds, so that is something we'll have to take a look at tomorrow. So the car drove home pretty much perfectly and we parked it in my driveway. I think it was 2 AM when we got here. We left it here so that today we can take a look at everything that is possibly wrong with the car, and we already noticed some stuff. So now let's perform an inspection on the car in the daylight. To summarize, this is a 1991 Audi 100 and we have decided to call him Dimitri because he looks like a Slavic boat. He has a very reliable 2-liter 4-cylinder engine producing 101 horsepower and has 240,000 kilometers on the clock. For all of this German boatness, Thibaut has paid 1150 euros, which leaves us with a budget of 350 euros to fix it in order to pass technical inspection. So let's put it on the lift so that we can see what we'll need to spend that money on. Apart from a lifter tick, the engine seems pretty healthy and it doesn't leak anywhere, so for the technical inspection there should be no issues there. But while we were looking in the engine bay, we noticed that the wiper fluid was empty and that does need to work for the inspection. So we'll need to look into it. After filling it up with fluid, it was apparent that something is failing big time. It looks like a hose and the container are leaking, so that is the first fix we will need to put on our to-do list. While the car was making pee-pee, we were done looking at the engine bay, so it was time to take a look underneath. The first thing that caught our attention was the fact that the car is on lowering springs, which is illegal in Belgium without the right paperwork, and obviously we don't have that paperwork. So we'll need to do something about these. Then the state of the tires got our attention, and man, were we unpleasantly surprised. The dry rotted threads are separating and showing the steel wires behind them. Driving on these is just plain dangerous, and it is most definitely the cause of the vibrations we felt.
Daar ben ik ook mee naar huis gereden.
Shit man.
Hier zit een nagel in.
Nice. The front tires were okay but quite bald, so all 4 tires need to be changed. The front brakes are worn but still acceptable. In the near future these will need replacement. The rears, however, are really bad. It looks like there's something wrong with the caliper, which causes the weird wear pattern on the disc. So the discs and pads will need replacement, and hopefully the caliper is still savable. Then we started taking off all the fender liners to see if they are hiding any rust. Apart from a big gaping hole in the wheel well, there isn't anything worrying like rust or something. However, as said before, the front fenders are quite crusty.
Dat is kit dat daarover hangt. Echt zonder zever.
Ja, dat is wel iets beter dan een kat, hè.
Oeh. Ja.
De.
Nee. Luckily the rust in the rear is limited to the surface, so it didn't really create any holes. And we also found the same type of surface rust on the other side. The driveline looks to be in okay shape, but Thibaut is unsure if he felt the clutch slipping on the way home, so that is something we'll have to take a look at later. It also looks like the seal for the shifter linkage is failing, so that will need addressing as well. Lastly, Thibaut needs to buy a new muffler to replace this straight piece of pipe, because it sounds horrible and the car will fail inspection like this. So that is already quite a big list of things to do, and it will be a challenge to do all of this within the tight budget. The next video will be a massive episode where we are going to fix everything on Dimitri that we have spotted today and some additional stuff. We are doing this during 2 days of full-time wrenching, and I have documented the entire process for your entertainment, so I hope you'll enjoy it. And let me know in the comments what you think about these types of videos. Until next time.